Good afternoon. Thank you all for attending this Housing Trust / Conservation meeting. This is maybe one of the most exciting meetings I've had the pleasure to be part of. And I start by thanking Bob Spencer for putting this together, and the rest of the Affordable Housing Trust in Harwich. We have a very active committee and moving very, hopefully quickly to take some action and provide some more affordable housing. The reason I'm so excited about this meeting we're having and our speaker is that I thought for a long time we had this narrative that seems to be taken as gospel, that there's a difference between the requirement for open space and for housing, that we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think, in truth, there's no reason that we should be working against each other. We're all part of the same solution. There's no reason to think that we can't have affordable housing coincide and coexist with open space if we wisely use our resources. Second line, what we think is important for Harwich, both as open space and as housing. And so this coming together, and I really appreciate Bob Spencer and Watt starting these discussions, because we have to move forward. We do have to protect our open space, but as you all know, we desperately need housing at the same time, or we're not going to be able to function as a community. And so with that, again, thank you very much for your attendance. I'm sure we'll all learn a lot. I really look forward to our speaker, and I'll listen and take notes. I'll turn it down to Michael Locke, who's the chair of the Harwich Conservation Trust, for the introductions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this volume work? Yes. Thank you, Larry, for introducing this collaborative presentation. I'm Michael Locke, Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust. It was founded in 1988 by volunteers from all walks of life with a common goal of preserving natural lands that protect our water quality, our scenic views, wildlife habitat, all of those experiences which hold us here and draw so many more. And we welcome the opportunity to explore ways to collaborate to meet the challenges of affordable housing while also protecting our sensitive natural resources. And we're really grateful to have Bob Wilber here to present on this intersection between affordable housing and land conservation. Thank you, Bob, for driving down from Boston. Bob has more than 40 years of experience in public and private land trust conservation field, currently serving as the director of the Massachusetts Division of Conservation Services. The Division of Conservation Services offers grants to municipalities and nonprofit organizations for the acquisition of conservation land and parkland, as well as for park renovation and development. The Division of Conservation Services also reviews conservation restrictions, administers the Conservation Land Tax Credit Program, and supports conservation districts statewide. Prior to that role, Bob served as the Director of Land Protection with the Massachusetts Audubon Society. He has been involved in a number of projects creating affordable housing in the town of Stowe, Massachusetts, both in his previous role as chair of Stowe's Community Preservation Committee and also as president of the Stowe Conservation Trust, which is their local all-volunteer land trust. Those experiences give Bob a familiarity with the challenge of creating affordable housing and opportunities for collaboration with local land conservation. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm going to see if I can put this in here, if that will work. How's that? Very good. Good. All right. So again, thank you for having me. I want to start with an important admission, which is that I don't consider myself to be an expert on the subject of affordable housing or even the intersection of housing and conservation. I've had some successful experiences with it, and I'm interested in sharing those with anybody who's interested in it. But as I was driving down here, and Mike told me that there were 100 people signed up, and I was thinking to myself, I've got 100 people signed up on a talk that I am not an expert on. And I thought, that's a good way to kill your confidence on the way down to the presentation. Yes, sir.
You came from more than 50 miles away, you're an expert.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And you also took care of the humor aspect at the beginning of the talk, which I appreciate that a lot. So Mike mentioned I came down from Boston. I actually came down from my home today, which is in Stowe, Mass. I usually say Stowe, no E, no ski. Because it's amazing how many people don't know, people that live in Massachusetts, that don't know that the town of Stowe exists. It's a very small town, it's about 7,000 people. I'll talk about it a little bit here, but it's a nice small town, like a lot of the towns on the Cape. My parents lived in Eastham for many years, and so I know how wonderful the Cape is. Also, my conservation career has given me opportunities to poke around the nooks and crannies of basically every place in Massachusetts, certainly including the Cape and the islands. And I am a huge fan of the Cape. Cape Cod, it's just an amazing, amazing place. And I can't say that without acknowledging my virtual lifelong friendship with Mark Robinson, who heads up the Compact Cape Cod Conservation Trust, and the amazing work that he's done. And he introduced me to Mike 20 years ago, something like that, maybe 25. It's always longer than I think, so I'll say probably 25. And really pleased to be here with you. So my goal is to share some of the experiences that I've had, the different approaches, and to inspire a dialogue that you all will have and continue to have to talk about potential collaborations between conservation and housing. And so before I start the presentation, there's one more thing I want to say, and the first is just to acknowledge that there are two and really three simultaneous crises that we are dealing with as a society. One of them is climate, responding to climate change. A very obvious one, gets more clear every day. We had the week we had, was it only last week? Or maybe it was the week before last, I lose track, but we had, where I live in Stowe, and the Stowe, Acton, and Maynard area, had very close to a tornado. And I lost 2 huge trees, but in my immediate neighborhood, I saw 5 houses with gigantic hardwood trees on top of the house. And that's something I've never seen in my life, frankly, never thought I would. And I was trying to go to Western Mass for a 5 o'clock appointment in Greenfield. It took me literally an hour and a half to get onto Route 2 because it usually takes me 10 minutes, just hour and a half because of down trees and down wires. And then later that week we had the hurricane come through, and in between torrential downpours and flooding in Leominster and all of that, and all in 1 week. So It's real, it's here, and we need to do everything we can do to make the future in a climate-changing world better. A related crisis is the biodiversity crisis, which gets less airtime, but is really, really serious. The impacts of climate change, without concerted effort by humans, the estimates are that perhaps more than 50% of plants and animals will become extinct as a result of climate change. And so the good news is that, especially in Massachusetts, we have a really vibrant conservation ethic in Massachusetts, and we are doing something about that to change what the future will be and to help plants and animals in Massachusetts continue to thrive off in the future. The third crisis is the housing crisis. And for many people, including me, it's really an affordable housing crisis, is the one that I acknowledge. And in the town that I live in, I am hyper aware of the need for affordable housing. My wife and I have lived there for 29 years. We've raised a family there. We've watched it become more and more wealthy and more homogeneous. And that was a concern. I think diversity is good in almost every angle. Biodiversity being a good example, but economic diversity in the community is another important good that is worth preserving. So forgive me for my soapbox pitch right at the beginning. I didn't actually intend to do it quite like that, but I want to acknowledge those crises and the fact that there are things we can do to impact those things. And that's why we're all here. That's why we're all sitting in a room in a community center having a conversation. So without further ado, let me get into it here. Maybe here's where I'll move the mic so I can stay off to the side a little bit more and won't block Mike. So this is the answer to your question, where the heck is Stowe, Mass? It's in the central part of the state. It's next to Acton and Bolton and Hudson and Maynard, if you know any of those towns. Yeah, nice small town. We love our fruit orchards. There are 4 very large fruit orchards. In general, actually, we're really proud to have held on to our agricultural base. We're one of the few communities inside the 495 belt. We are just inside the 495 belt that has managed to hang on to its agricultural base, the farms and orchards specifically. And of course we have cider donuts, so I should have brought some in front. Yeah, I should have. It was a mistake to even mention it, but probably had the air in my tires let out when I go out to the parking. So I'm going to go right into a project here. What I'm going to be telling you about are 2 different projects. And there are 2 different projects that the Stowe Conservation Trust, the all-volunteer local land trust that Mike mentioned, that's in Stowe, one of roughly 130 local land trusts in Massachusetts. As some of you probably know, but not all of you, the land trust movement began here in Massachusetts back in the 1890s. And something we should all be really proud of. And while I'm at it, I'll say, you could actually argue that the concept of land conservation also started in Massachusetts. with the establishment of the Boston Common 400 years ago. That was the first time where a society said, let's set aside this piece of real estate here for the public good. And that concept has been carried forward. It certainly was the impetus behind the formation of the land trust movement, the birth of the land trust movement in the 1890s. And we are still the land of the local land trust. There are roughly 130 local land trusts in Massachusetts. And they play a really important role, and they have huge potential to play a key role in establishing more affordable housing. And so the two projects I'm going to tell you about are very different. They're at dramatically different scales, really the other end, the opposite end of the spectrum, if you will, of scale. And hopefully, in that sense, they'll be useful to you. So the first one is, just for orientation here, the two labels that I have, the two white labels on that map. The first one says Town of Stowe, and that is the Captain Sargent land. So just think of it as a very large town-owned conservation land. And then the other label, the other white label that says Stowe Conservation Trust, that's for the Red Acre Woodlands, which is a very large conservation land owned and managed by the Stowe Conservation Trust, the private land trust in town, the all-volunteer land trust. And there was a property in between, roughly about 50 acres, that's identified as Cornelius. It's in pink. And that was a very important property for obvious reasons. It would link those two properties, Captain Sargent and Red Acre Woodlands. And so that was of great interest for conservation for many, many years. And so in 2002, a developer, let me actually back up one step. That Cornelius property was under Chapter 61, which is the state's preferential tax assessment program. The theory being that landowners who have open land prior to developing it, that land generates benefits to the host community. So in return, they are afforded a reduced tax assessment. That's how that whole program is based on the theory of public benefits flowing from that land. And if and when the owner of that land proposes a development that would end those benefits, that would convert the land, develop the land, the community has a right of first option, a chance to pull it back from proposed development. And that's an important piece. And so in 2002, a very, very large, very intensive 40B was proposed on the property. This property has a lot of wetlands in it. There are only 5 acres of upland in this property, and they proposed to build 30 units with a 60-car parking lot, and it just was out of scale for the neighborhood that it was in. This was kind of a winding country lane, and just was not the right scale at all. And so the community was strongly opposed to it and pushed the select board to exercise the right of first refusal on the property. The select board did. They used the provision where they could assign the right of first option to a nonprofit, in this case the Trust for Public Land, The Trust for Public Land unfortunately defaulted on raising funds and had to back out of the contract. And what followed after that is that the developer who was interested in building that 30-unit development had moved on to other projects, was no longer interested in purchasing the property. And the owner, who had received an offer from the developer to purchase the land and build a 40B, so just want to make sure everyone stays together here. 40B is a provision in the Commonwealth's general laws that allows a developer, if a community has less than 10% affordable housing in their housing stocks, then a developer can come in and propose a affordable housing, a development under affordable housing, and override a number of aspects of zoning and build a development provided that at least 25% of it is affordable housing. And it's very interesting that almost none of them are ever more than 25%. I couldn't resist that one, but it's true. And so that provision was a real concern. That owner, my point that I'm trying to make here is that owner had received what a lot of real estate appraisers would call a super premium offer, because it was an offer for a 40B. It was an offer that basically was outside of what was possible under zoning, and more units specifically per area. And so she had missed out on a golden opportunity to sell her land and retire and live happily off into the future. And I actually lived down the street from this, so I felt badly for her. I thought she got burned in that whole thing, and I knew she did. And so I stayed in contact with her for years, trying to get a dialogue, trying to get some traction to talk about a sale of the property for conservation at that point. And so then, finally, in 2017, you can see how long that took. So she was very bitter right after the whole thing unraveled, and she missed out on her chance to sell at a super premium value. It took her many years to get to the point where she was willing to discuss price and a potential sale. We eventually we had some really good appraisal work done, so we knew what the current appraised market value was at any time, and we were able to reach agreement at $450,000 to purchase the property. So one of the things, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is the power that comes from public and private collaborations. So the land trust is the private entity. So when the land trust can collaborate closely with the municipal government, you're able to do some really interesting things, because each of them has unique abilities that the other doesn't have. And so a good example of that is, in this instance here, when we had the opportunity to purchase the property for $450,000, a property that had been appraised and sold for, or at least a purchase and sale contract for at $1.5 million, only 10 or 15 years earlier. We wanted to jump on that, and the land trust can put down some cash to secure an option to purchase contract. So what that did is secured those favorable terms that we had finally negotiated. The town can't do that. The town can't put money down to secure an option contract. It's something in the procurement laws that prevent that. So that's a good example of the type of good that can come out of that type of collaboration. Yes?
So if the town
Just
can't,
speak up, please. I want to make sure everyone hears.
if the town can't purchase it, but the land trust within the town can purchase it, how are you not a part of the town?
So, did you say if the land trust purchases it?
No.
Okay.
I don't understand the distinction being made between the town and the land trust, because the land trust is a part of the town.
Land trust is part of the community. The land trust is a private entity. It's not a public entity. It's not a municipal entity.
Okay, so the citizens put up a land trust.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would say the community. They're all part of the community.
Okay.
But hitching those two wagons together, the private land trust and the municipal government, is a really powerful thing to do. And I'm going to come back to that over and over again here, because that's one of the most important lessons, takeaways that I've learned in the projects that I've been involved with. So the trust voted to put $22,500 down to secure the option. Question?
I'm also a little confused. You said the property is listed in September 2014 at $1.49 million,
Mhm.
but
No takers.
Because the first guy was already done with it.
Yeah, the market had changed for that point. At that point, it was way overpriced. Nobody responded to that listing.
How many acres of land was involved?
It's 50 acres in total.
50 acre one.
All right, so
50 acre.
there you can see the outline of the property, and it's both the green and the red. And so the good news was that we had very favorable terms to purchase this land, finally. The bad news was that the timing could not have been worse. We had 3 or 4 very large projects going. The trust did. So did the town, for conservation purposes, had projects going. The Community Preservation Committee had made many commitments on other projects, so they had very little capacity. So figuring out how are we going to come up with the money? Where's the money going to come from? Even to get to 450 was not a simple thing by any means. And it's really what drove us to think about reaching out to the Stowe Municipal Affordable Housing Trust and saying, hey, would you guys like to be part of this project? You know, and so with the land trust holding the option, the land trust and conservation had strong leverage. Basically could determine, you know, how this would play out. It was our contract that we held. And I remember going to the board of directors at the Stowe Conservation Trust and suggesting that we partner with the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. And especially some of the older members of the trust, they thought I was out of my mind. And why would we want to get involved with that? We're a conservation organization. We're going to confuse people. And I understand all that. I get it. And so it was important that we thought about communication and messaging, but also thought about structuring this in a way that it didn't sort of get away from us and turn into something that we didn't want to be part of. And so I knew the neighborhood really well, and I knew that back in 2002, when 30 units of housing was proposed there, people just went bonkers because it was just too much, too intensive. So I knew that doing something, a more modest approach in terms of numbers, would be one of the important elements to it. And so we were able to approach the Affordable Housing Trust. Here's a really key point, and this is one of the reasons why collaborations between conservation and housing can really be helpful to everybody, everyone involved, that is. So for the conservation stakeholders, both the Conservation Commission in town, but also the Stowe Conservation Trust, we were having a hard time coming up with $450,000 to jump on this golden opportunity to buy this high priority at a really good price. And we held the contract, so we had leverage. Real estate, as you all know, real estate is valued based on development potential. That's the framework for determining, what is a piece of land worth. It's what is its value. It's so-called highest and best use. And the highest and best use is almost always some type of development. And so what did that mean? Is that the portion along the front there, I guess it's 8 acres along the front, that's where there was significant value, because that's where the portion of it that had the road frontage, had the access, and so we could partner with the Affordable Housing Trust, sell them only 8 acres of land, but have them pay half of the purchase price. And they were thrilled with it, because they were getting 6 lots to build affordable housing on for $225,000. Yes?
So the 6 units that the Affordable Housing Trust created, were those then affordable home ownership units?
Yes.
So
Yes.
not rental, they were affordable.
That's correct.
Ownership.
Yep.
So they were basically then built 6 units of housing, single-family houses on 1 acre lots.
That's right.
I'm assuming there's no sewer that they need to deal with wastewater on these parcels.
Correct.
And public water?
No public
No
water,
public water.
on-site water
So
also.
the only density that you can achieve, that therefore is you need a 40,000 acre lot in order to host 4 bedrooms.
Right.
or else.
Question here?
Can you please repeat
Yeah,
the
so
questions? We can't hear back here.
Water supply, so that means that there is public water coming onto the property. A big concern here is our septic versus sewers. Is the town of Stowe now all sewer?
No, so the reference to public water supply was to create 1 well for the 6 lots. That's what that was implying. So I'm going to suggest that we hold questions until the end, so that we can get the flow, and I can make sure to get the details out to you, because that's really my goal. And then we'll get into questions, because those are really important too. I totally appreciate that. All right, so the trust, one of the things the trust was able to do was to work with the abutters to do outreach and communication to the abutters, because we knew they were the most likely ones to come to town meeting and say, bad idea, let's not do this. And we had worked very hard to carve out this partnership and collaboration, and we felt good about it. This was going to be a good thing, and so we met with them regularly and basically gave them first updates, which they appreciated. You know, before we went public with a given message, they would hear it first. And they very much appreciated that. So when it came time for the town meeting vote, they all came out and they were all in favor of this. Several of them spoke in favor of it. So it was very, very, very positive. So this is just how the budget looked. There was some CPA funds involved. There was some private fundraising. And then there was the Affordable Housing Trust funds. And so a number of lessons learned, key takeaways. So one is we could have just waited for another Chapter 61 right of first refusal. In other words, the landowner who had tried to sell it before and got burned, she could find a more realistic listing price and sell the property on her own if it were to be converted, as if it was proposed to be converted under that sale, the town would have a right of first refusal. And so we could wait for that again, but that did not, and especially in retrospect, was not a good way to go. Instead, we worked with her directly on that. Find a way to seize favorable opportunities despite funding challenges. That was a big one, and the fact that the housing component could basically cover half of the purchase price, that was huge. It was absolutely huge. It might have been the key to the success of the whole thing, actually. That's how important that was. And then the last bullet of land trusts moving quickly, quietly having the negotiation, you know, out of the public limelight, at someone's kitchen table. We eventually, we had some good appraisal done, but we were able to reach agreement and then secure those favorable terms through a contract. And that was a key part of the whole overall project as well. Really important to show to the community that housing interests and conservation interests can work together. It's not just an endless string of train wrecks. We can actually work together. One of the things that I disagree with most, and it was, you alluded to this in your comments, is that it doesn't have to be an either or. And the public, in many ways, the media has framed it as an either or. Either conservation gets the land or housing gets the land. They're always fighting nose to nose for the same parcels of land. And that absolutely does not need to be the case. There can be real collaborations and mutually beneficial collaborations around land in the right circumstances. I want to be really key that for those of you, especially from land trusts, my message is not to say every one of your projects should be a housing conservation project, because that doesn't make any sense. There are many properties that just would not be appropriate for that at all. But that said, what my message is to be open to those types of collaborations and to be looking for the types of properties that will lend themselves to that, and then approach it a certain way. So more on that to come here. Let's see, I'm not going to read every one of these. The last one is an important one, just staying positioned and especially having some good appraisal consultations so you can remain aware of what the current market value of the property is at any moment in time. One of the things we did, I mentioned that I referred to potential reputational risk, and that's what the board of directors of the Stowe Conservation Trust were so concerned about, which I totally get. And so the way we dealt with that is to really nail down that not more than 6 units of affordable housing could be built on this property. That was part of our agreement to have them end up with 6 lots for affordable housing. And so we did that with both with an MOU and also with a deed restriction that was written into the deed to them. There's your deed restriction. So that was a relatively modest project, pretty small project, and but it was a good opportunity for demonstrating the collaboration. The Affordable Housing Trust was very pleased to end up with 6 lots to create affordable housing on. They had a tough time getting community buy-in. They were attempting to establish some housing here, and the neighbors would oppose it, and nothing occurred. And that happened over and over and over again. So they were pleased to work with us. It got them to the point of ownership and ability to build tomorrow much quicker than they had been doing on their own. And the trust was thrilled because we were able to bring their financial participation into the project, which made the whole project feasible. So I mentioned before that Stowe is one of the defining elements of Stowe, our fruit orchards. Another one is our golf courses. So there are 3 or 4, I've forgotten actually, I should know, but the 3 or 4 very large golf courses, well-known golf courses in Stowe. So it's a destination location for golf enthusiasts. And the largest one is the Stowe Acres Country Club. So Stowe Acres had been there for 100 years, and in a town, a small town like that, 328 acres. I've been told by 2 different appraisers that the Stowe Acres Country Club was the largest remaining undeveloped property inside of 495. And so you can imagine the interest in that and the value that that property had, the market value. And so the community was, residents of the community were, the whole time they've lived there, we're always sort of whispering what's going to happen with Stowe Acres, because it was so large that if it were developed in a way that wasn't good, in a way that either just way too many units or a style that was completely contrary, it really could change the sense of place for that town, and everybody knew it, and so there was a lot at stake as to what the future of Stowe Acres was going to be. And so we started hearing, we being conservation stakeholders, so both the Conservation Commission and the Stowe Conservation Trust, started hearing rumors that there were ongoing discussions, negotiations involving Stowe Acres, and that it's possible that the entire property was going to be sold. It's 2 18-hole golf courses. There's the north course and the south course, total 328 acres. And so the idea of the whole place being sold to a national home builder was a really scary thought. And so there, just for a little more context, you can see it outlined in the southwest quadrant of the town. And And that southwest quadrant is important. This is from, on the right-hand side, the map on the right-hand side is from the open space and recreation plan. And what it shows, is that the southwest quadrant was underserved by open space. There wasn't enough open space in that part of town. And we often heard about that from residents of the town, of that portion of the town. And so those two things go together very nicely. Stowe Acres was a golden opportunity to address a real need to create more protected open space in that part of our community. This is what development of Stowe Acres would look like under current zoning, the so-called as-of-right development. And so those would be acre-and-a-half lots. They would be giant energy inefficient homes. And that was a very scary thought. And that's what a national builder would build. They would come in and build exactly that. And so these are the types of homes that we had a lot of, probably too much of, in the previous 3 decades. Was beginning to change the way the town felt. And you know, when I first moved there, it was this funky sort of rural place with a very wealthy person and a very modest income person living right next to each other and enjoying life. And it had gradually become more and more subdivisions with houses that just did not seem in keeping. And so, like these here, we thought they oh, that's great. I love that reaction. Yeah, it sort of says it all. It just really didn't feel like Stowe, Massachusetts. It felt like someplace else. And so we didn't want that. There were a lot of things we didn't know, but what we did know is we didn't want that. And similarly, we weren't crazy about some of the possibilities under a hostile 40B, where a developer would come in and potentially propose a very, very large development under the 40B law. And so that was a concern as well. That was sort of maybe the other end of the spectrum in some ways, but we really didn't want to see that either. And so this is, that's actually not me, but that's supposed to be me in 2020 when I heard the first rumor that the whole property is about to be sold. And so we heard it was a national home builder. They were going to build the whole thing. And that was kind of the reaction around the town. If you went into the little convenience store in town, that's what people were talking about. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen at Stowe Acres?
And the guys with the jackets and the suits with the papers and the hard hats. Those guys have to wear hard hats.
Yeah. I'm going to keep moving. And so there were some people, some of the town officials, even a couple of the directors of the Stowe Conservation Trust who were saying, oh, don't worry about it. Let's just wait for our right of first refusal. Because the golf course was under Chapter 61B. 61B is for open space or recreation. And so same concept. The property was about to enter into a purchase and sale agreement where it would be developed. At that point, the owner had to send that purchase and sale agreement to the select board and say, do you want to exercise your right of first refusal to preserve this property? Otherwise, it will be sold for development. And I didn't like that approach at all. And the reason why I didn't like that approach is because even a simple back of the envelope calculation, that property was worth anywhere from $17 to $25 million. And I'm not sure, as dyed-in-the-wool conservationist as I am, that I'd even be in favor of that. I really, because it would have bankrupted the town to do anything else for decades. And so I really didn't want to be faced with that choice of having to make that decision. Do I vote yes or no for this? So I didn't like that option at all. I thought in this case, given the magnitude of purchase price that would have to be matched, because that's how that law works. You match the developer's offer. And so that wasn't a particularly attractive option. So I said, you know what? And I will acknowledge this might have been a little bit naive, maybe, but sometimes that's how really good things happen. And so what I said to the town planner and the chair of the Conservation Commission and the town administrator was, how about if we just ask them if they will take a time out? You know, they haven't signed the contract yet. They haven't sent it into the select board. That whole thing where the intensity starts and you start to get into intractable positions. I said, how about if we take a really different approach here and see if they would be willing to put their plans on hold and work with us for a month or so. And us is the Conservation Trust, the town planner, the town administrator, and the chair of the Conservation Commission. I have to acknowledge that this was in the darkest days of COVID, and that provided some amazing coverage for us to have quiet meetings over at the country club that went on for several months. But you could do the same thing today. You don't need that exact same setting. And so the offer that we made to them is the Conservation Trust will pay for hiring a very talented, innovative, creative planner to help work with all of us we'll identify what our objectives are of each of the different pieces, conservation, planning, housing, developer, profit, and so on. And then that planner will work with us to show us some possibilities. And perhaps we can come up with a vision for this property, a comprehensive vision for this property. That is more interesting than any of us could come up with on our own. And that's exactly what happened. So the trust, we hired a planner. I had been on the spring speaker series of the Conway School of Design the previous spring. And I had met a couple of their instructors there, and so first thing I did was to call her and say, do you have any recommendations? I'm looking for just the right person. I'm looking for a land use planner who is cutting edge, who is creative and innovative, but is aware of some of the interesting things that are happening across Massachusetts and New England and even across the US. Of how development and conservation can coexist. And so we hired this person's name was Peter Flinker, and his firm is Dodson and Flinker Associates. It's not essential that you hire them. I want to be absolutely clear on that. I'm sure there are others that are of that same profile, but that's the type of consultant that you're looking for. Someone that can help facilitate a diverse group of stakeholders and craft a vision that is more exciting, more interesting, more beneficial than any of the individual participants could do on their own. That's really the big takeaway here, is that one right there. And you all can do that. Every town can do that. There are ways to do that, and I'm going to get into that here. So when we made that offer, would you work with us for 2 months, and it won't cost you a thing, we'll pay for the planner? This is the kinds of reactions we were getting at first, and you couldn't blame them, right? I couldn't blame them at all. I totally anticipated that it would be like, what are you trying to do here? They're thinking, are you trying to draw me in to delay my development? What are you trying to do? I get it, but what we were proposing was exactly what we intended. And all we wanted was a chance to sit down with them and hear their goals, and for them to hear our goals, and then to make an honest effort over the next month or so to look at different options that might generate those goals, and then some. And so after they got over their original shock with the idea, they realized that we meant exactly what we were saying, and it wasn't going to cost them anything. We would pay for it. Peter Flinker helped us. We started looking at different examples of alternatives to the giant house on the 1.5-acre lot, and specifically what are called New England village development styles. And so it's, you know, a lot of the really, you go to a place like, I don't know, like Woodstock, Vermont, and you go through there and it's this quaint downtown. There's so many, you know, maybe that one's a little high end, it is, but there are lots of others all across Massachusetts that are, you know, a place like Great Barrington, for instance, you know, where it's that downtown development pattern, and with lots of housing, shops nearby, walkable, sidewalks, people know each other. That's the type of setting that New England village design is all about. It's basically creating what was established in a lot of these New England villages many, many years ago. And so the first one there was in West Concord, Mass, the Riverwalk development. And first thing you notice there is very small, energy efficient homes in close proximity to each other. It's not as land consumptive as most of the sort of traditional development patterns under current zoning. This one's in Norton. This one highlights the open green and sidewalks, porches, people, you know, good chance to get to know your neighbor, and so on. And so after looking at that, that was the kind of thing we wanted. And I'm jumping ahead here. So this is the development proposal that is going to be built at Stowe Acres. And really key point. This is one of the real key points of this presentation, which is by taking a proactive approach, and I'm saying this from the land trust's perspective, by taking a proactive approach and working shoulder to shoulder with your municipal officials, you can create exactly the types of affordable housing that your community most needs at that moment in time. You know, I should have polled everyone right at the beginning, but I'm guessing there are a lot of housing officials here, housing advocates and officials here, and good for you. I mean that very sincerely, good for you. And that the chance to work together and create exactly the types of housing that your community most needs. That's how you end up with it. Even if 40B doesn't guarantee that the 25% of those units are going to be the type that you need, and that the community needs, the most demand for at that moment in time. So for land trusts, homework for all land trusts is to get to know what are the needs of your community in terms of affordable housing. Talk to your town planner, talk to your town administrator, talk to others, and get up to speed on exactly what type of housing is most needed in your community at that moment in time, so that you can think about where you might be able to help generate some of that. So this, I won't read the whole thing, but we're really proud of what is going to be built here. The housing pod, which you see the map of on the right, so there are the total number of units, it's something like 187 units in total. That housing pod is something like 34 acres, only 34 acres in size. So these are much smaller homes, much more energy efficient, on much, much smaller lots. And with that New England Village design infused through it. There we go. So there's a little simulation of what the development will look like. At town meeting, many of you will appreciate this. You know, when you get to town meeting, you worked on your project and you know it's going to come up for vote soon, and you're nervous and you're not quite sure how it's going to go. And this one, believe me, I had done dozens of open space conservation projects previously at town meeting, and those were always almost unanimous. Very green town. The housing one, 187 units of housing, there was a huge question mark for me. What was the community going to say here? And when the vote came, there were 197 votes cast. There were only 6 opposed, which was incredible. I almost fell off my chair. And it was because we had done our homework. And we did a ton of outreach and public information sessions and devoted a website to this to answer people's questions, and people really liked it. They really liked the fact that we were going to be building the type of housing that didn't exist in town and was really needed on a couple of different levels, a nice offering of menu choices. They liked the open space portion of it as well. This is what the units are going to look like. They have steel roofs. They're really quite nice. Probably integrate solar throughout that development. Be really very nice. A good one for people to downsize in rather than having to move to a different town. That was what we're hearing from a lot of folks, is that to sell their family home and then move to a small home. Stowe didn't have that, so that wasn't an option. And they were real concerned about that. They were going to have to leave the community because of that. So during our planning meetings over at the country club, I heard this reference to Mapledale. Someone said Mapledale, but I barely heard it. I said, what did you say? And they said Mapledale Country Club. Well, this is the Rainbow Homestead, which is now the golf course headquarters. That's the main building. We learned that 100 years ago, this had been one of the only golf courses for people of color in the United States, and it was in Stowe. And it was established in 1923, the Mapleville Country Club. Sadly, they lost that in the crash of '29, 6 years later, but still, that history was something we were very proud of. And so, under this plan, there you can see the north course, you can see the housing pod is the tan colored piece. So, of the entire 328 acres, roughly 10% of it was devoted to housing. Dense, really innovative housing done a different way, less consumptive, less land consumptive. And that created opportunities for the adjacent open space. The south course, we want that to remain in golf for as long as it makes economic sense to do that. So we put a conservation restriction on that south course. That's the historically significant part of the property. And then the north course, basically the town purchased everything but the housing pod as open space and active recreation land, so a place for ball fields and so on. And that will take place over time, over the next few years. So I think I've covered most of these, and this is really the point, is that land trusts and municipal governments have unique abilities, and when you connect them together, you can do some really, really interesting things. A couple of the key takeaways for this. I'm going to go straight to, for the land trust, understanding that affordable housing is one of the real important community needs in your community. And that will probably only increase as time goes on. Similar to open space, very similar actually. That the need for open space will likely increase as time goes on. Every bit of open space that's set aside will increase in value to the community over time, similar to affordable housing. And so for land trust, realize that in the course of your conservation work, you have the opportunity to move some other important community benefits forward. And that's a key message. Definitely think creatively. Don't just sit back and wait for things to unfold, be presented to you, to happen to you and your community. Consider taking a more proactive approach so that you can shape what will unfold, if not determine it altogether. Be aware of the leverage that you hold. You hold a lot of leverage. A land trust can be the key to whether the community supports or opposes something. And if the land trust is sitting at the table with an owner and or developer with 2 or 3 municipal officials with them, they're representing so many of the decision makers. And so developers are business people. The old adage that time is money is so true with developers. So if they see a path to be able to move forward much more quickly, they will almost always pursue that. And so by having something that is, the vision is generated collaboratively, in some ways, especially with the commitment of public outreach that we did, we essentially pre-vetted the whole idea with the community. And so they knew that, when it got to town meeting and then the additional review under Zoning Board of Appeals, ZBA, that the community was already behind it. And that's a very powerful thing. So I'm going to just leave these up here rather than read them. I'm just leave those up because I want to talk off of this. I want to move away from what's written here. The last point, I want to make sure you really got what I was trying to say about using the leverage you have. So this instance here, where there was a very iconic property in our community, it was more than we could afford. We also knew that at that moment the town really, really needed some housing diversity in a huge way. And so being able to fold all of those together, we were very fortunate because we had an owner and a prospective developer who was receptive to what we were talking about. The town and the land trust could have done this one a very different way. We could have gotten the property under an option to purchase. It's called securing site control. And once we had site control, we could hire that planner. That planner could go through that same exercise, generate that vision, and we could put that out through a request for proposals to developers. And so that's, think about it that way too, because each situation is different. And especially in a superheated market like Cape Cod, an RFP, request for proposal, for creating some affordable housing as part of a housing conservation project, that's going to get a lot of attention. The development community is going to be very interested in that. You're going to get a lot of people who are going to look really closely at that. And if you've done your homework right, so things like good appraisal information, so what should you be willing to sell this opportunity to a developer at what price? If you got that part right, you should get plenty of action, if you will, for that opportunity. So really the point is to use the leverage you have to, because what we did here, I left out a key piece. What is going to happen here is 40B. We did this under 40B. This is a town-sponsored 40B, community-sponsored 40B, using the powers of 40B that override zoning, that allow us to do some more interesting things. We use that to our advantage to create this vision and build it. The same thing could be done under an RFP to developers. So I see a lot of nodding heads on those last couple of points. That's great, because I thought that was really an important piece of it, that I wanted to make sure you got that piece. Be proactive. Use the leverage you have and end up with exactly what you want and need, as opposed to letting things happen to you as a community. That's my pitch. So happy to take some questions. I think you were first.
Well, I don't know if I have a question or a comment, but 40B was not intended to increase the value of land. You're probably aware of this.
Yes.
And so developers typically, when you're building rental housing, come up with a mathematical number for what they can spend per unit. So let's say that's $30,000. So let's say you can build 10 units on a piece of land, and so they value it at $300,000. But when they come in with 40B, they say, well, now I can do 60 units at $30,000, and now it's worth a lot more. And that is supposed to not happen. And I mean, I because the developer is supposed to save money to be able to build more affordable housing. But developers don't want to do that. And it's a very important concept. 40B doesn't really answer in towns as much as the towns have thought over their history since 1969 when it passed. And they haven't the ability to do important things, which you know, because you said it in one way or the other, and to use 40B to make it a useful tool to create the housing that's needed, as opposed to something to resist it all costs.
Exactly. 40B is a very powerful tool. Use it to your advantage, or at least consider it. If the circumstances are right, consider using it to your advantage to allow you to do something that's more innovative. And for us, it was creating that number of total units. And incidentally, one of the things that this will do, one of the things that this project will do for our community when it's built is that we will be above our 10% threshold. So we will no longer be vulnerable to a developer coming in and proposing a hostile 40B that is not something we want. We'll have immunity for that. So that was a big selling point for the community as well. As that's sort of that's the cherry on top, I think, in some ways. Yes.
Were you able to engage a local developer, or did you have to come from out of state?
We were fortunate enough to get a local developer, not from Stowe, but from the town next door, and somebody who, again, we were very fortunate. I have to acknowledge that we were very fortunate. We ended up working with somebody who specializes in affordable housing, and also somebody who's an out-of-the-box thinker. So he was right there with us as we were thinking about some pretty innovative ideas.
Can you disclose who is it?
Sure, it's a guy named Mark O'Hagan, and I've forgotten what his company's name is. Mark's a great guy. That whole group of people that met over the series of months, we really got to have a lot of respect for each other, and it was a very, very positive thing. Right here?
So you had this huge area. Who bought what and for how much? Because we're told all the time that no developer is going to build anything because it costs over $100,000 to $200,000 per unit. So a $290K house is not clear cut, and especially if he's renting everything at affordable. So
Yeah.
who bought what part? How much did the whole thing cost?
Yep. So going back to what I was saying about the first project, where I mentioned that the value, from an appraised value perspective, the market value, was mostly tied up in the road frontage. And so the Housing Trust bought only 8 acres of the 50 acres that they paid half the purchase price. And they were thrilled because it worked out beautiful. That was what it was worth. And the trust was thrilled as well because it really worked for us. So in this instance, the reason I went back to that earlier example, because the same applied here. The most valuable portion of this property of the 328 acres, guess what it was? It's the housing plot, of course. And because there was 187 homes that were going to be built there. And so that was the most valuable. So the prospective developer paid the largest price. And he, being a smart individual, put his money down last when he knew that the other pieces were in place, that this could actually happen. He then put down his funds to purchase that housing plot. I don't know exactly what he paid, but I do know it was the largest component. The owner pursued sold a conservation restriction that was worth $3.7 million. They sold it for $1.5 million. Those were CPA funds. The difference was a charitable gift under federal income tax laws, and they were able to pursue deductions under what's called the enhanced federal tax incentives for conservation. So that really worked for them and their accountant, and they were very happy about that. And then on the north course, the town purchased everything but the housing pod for $5 million in total. So you could do the math and see that instead of paying somewhere between $17 and $25 million as a town, we paid $6.5 million and ended up with just the type of housing that we need most, and some new ball field areas. And the other thing that I didn't mention, but you probably assume, but I want to make sure everybody gets it, it sort of gets to what's in it. What's in it for the land trust? What's in it for the land trust are lots of things. Number one, financial participation in your conservation outcome. Number two, community support. My land trust actually got more members, new members, people that didn't really know about us. And they heard about our involvement with this project and said, good for you, that's the kind of organization I'd like to be part of. So really helpful. For the developer, it was the time is money part, seeing something that is pre-vetted and embraced by the community. That's a developer's dream, is to go into a project like that, especially a large number of units. And for the community, the benefits are just huge. And one of the points that I hadn't quite made yet is that it's not just about housing next to conservation. It's having that really be an integrated vision with trails and bike paths and other things like that, where those residents of that housing pod, they are going to have a sweet place there and be able to go right out their door and have miles and miles of paths to walk or bike or on. And so there's a real enhancement back to the development in terms of the adjacent open space.
My name is Jay Coburn. I am the CEO of the Community Development Partnership. We're the Lower Cape Region's nonprofit community development corporation and work on affordable housing.
Great, thanks.
And I just really want to thank you for bringing to the region the vision for what can happen. As you said, when we work together, when we're proactive,
Yeah.
when we're not afraid to bring in new ideas and new ways of thinking, and also when we're not afraid to kind of change the way that we develop land.
Yeah.
And that, here on the Cape, we can't solve this problem of affordable housing and preserving our water quality and open space with the way we've been developing this peninsula for the last 40 years.
Right.
We'll just perpetuate turning into suburban sprawl.
Yeah.
But we can bring in new housing and new housing like you have shown that's dense, energy efficient, that's much more friendly for single seniors.
Yeah.
So they're not living, down cul-de-sacs where every other house is empty because it's owned by a second homeowner.
Right.
And really build community and build affordability. But we have to change our vision and also too, if we're building this kind of housing, in our village centers, in East Harwich, creating walkable neighborhoods, that's what's going to be good for the environment as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for your great.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments very much, and I think you captured the opportunity really well in your words. In the back.
When will that project be completed? Maybe we could take a
go look at it.
We would love to have you come. Actually, there's going to be, I don't know, there's going to be a public open house, outdoor thing, October 30th. I forgot which day of the week October 30th is, but if you'd rather wait another year or two, so it's working through the ZBA right now, the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I will tell you that the ZBA keeps hearing from residents who attend these meetings, don't change anything. This is exactly what we want. Don't mess it up, basically, is what they're saying.
So my second question, it is a question. In your first development, people had bid about 30 units. And the second development, they loved 168 or whatever it is. And one of the things that impressed me the most, and in fact I was shocked by, was how attractive the renderings of the project are.
Yes.
I mean, and do you think the attractiveness of the renderings, along with all the other stuff you talked about, made a big difference in terms of the support of that?
So I want to make sure everyone could hear it, and that were the artist renderings of the units and the development itself helpful to community's reaction? And they definitely were. I think as much as anything, they help people visualize, what is this going to be? What do you do? It's just simply 187 units, just conjures up, whoa, do we really want to do that? This is a small town.
Yeah, most of the time those units look like a horrible thing.
Right.
Housing units presented were places we all want to live in.
Yeah, and
It's incredible.
I had to resist not showing you the full range. There were like 5 or 6 different models that are going to be built. They're all beautiful. And people started saying, I want to get in line. This is where I want to live.
Yeah, 13 years ago, East Harwich developed a plan called the East Harwich Village Center. That's 137 and 39. Exactly what you see today. What happened to that plan? Poof. Who's heard of it? 70 pages long, identical to what you just saw today, and absolutely nothing happened to it. What I'm really impressed with you is the collaboration, the working together from town government, to nonprofits, to the municipality, working together. Why didn't we sit down with Stagg to talk about his property for exactly what the East Harwich plan proposed, instead of now having a lumberyard there?
Yeah.
Why didn't our board of selectmen sit down with the seller to talk about, just like you said, the collaboration, the interest, the sharing of ideas, to develop a plan so that it's successful? What is our town doing? Nothing. I asked repeatedly the select board, they said, we can't purchase that, it's too expensive. We can't develop that, it's too expensive. Well, then sit with the buyer or the seller and work on a plan where it is feasible. We need to get our town moving on these objectives and not just sitting dead in the water. Because what's happening right now is out of control.
Non-traditional collaboration.
Right here in the front.
Bob, I'd like to know how you got around some things that we are facing as we try to preserve an open space in Hyannis 40-acre golf course, and we're not opposed to affordable housing on that site. But you mentioned at the beginning, when you talked about Stowe Acres, that it is undeveloped property. We are being told a golf course is developed property, and that they can move forward on this development. So I'm interested in how you got around that. You said Stowe Acres is undeveloped property, and we're being told that the state local government defines golf courses as developed property.
So therefore,
It's developed property so that we can go ahead and then continue. And they're saying that developed property, it's not about preserving open space. Okay, so.
No, I mean, most golf courses are considered to be open space, period.
And
Yeah.
so we're hearing that it's not defined as open space, it's defined as developed property. So all I'm saying is, how do you get away with some of this? I have just another example. Underserved open space area. So our area is in the middle of, defined by the state of Massachusetts, environmental justice community,
Mhm.
where there are, a low income,
Yep.
larger ethnic group. That's not really true. Another thing that you said is people can downsize in it. We've been told that there's no way that a development can regulate who can move into those units. So how can the local residents downsize in it? And then the last thing you mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, is the incentive of the owner to put the part of the property in your conservation restriction area. And we're being told that the owner, if we don't stop this, if we do stop it in development, then the owner will put in a 40B housing unit because the owner will get millions, plural, of dollars in tax incentives for putting in 40B.
Mhm.
How does that match up with the millions of dollars they might get in a conservation restriction area? In other words, every time we turn around, there's another.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer your question in a little bit of a roundabout way. So I'm going to, so hopefully it will be good. Hopefully you. It's really, really important for. I suggest that the land trust make sure you know what your affordable housing, the affordable housing needs of your community are at any moment in time. You should be up on that stuff. You should be aware of that stuff. The land trust, at the beginning of this partnership, the land trust and the planning department and the town administrator and the conservation all met and said, let's work together. Let's try to accomplish our individual and collective goals. And then when we actually started meeting with the owner and the respective developer, this is a really, really important one. It's super important to be just very respectful of listening to that person, listen to everything that they want to tell you as to what's important to them, what they want to get out of this. So in your instance, it's the landowner and what they're going to be paid to do the development that they're currently proposing. I would not recommend trying to deny that person's right or that corporation's right to pursue that outcome. That's their right. And so instead work with that. What is that amount? And is there another way to get there? Because there almost certainly is. And the fact that she or he is saying they want to do a 40B development, that's great. Because that's to do an alternative scenario to get them what they need to cooperate. You're probably going to need to do a 40B. Go to town-sponsored 40B. And so, if there's any way to engage them, I know things have gotten, polarized there, but, to be able to represent to that owner that there is a better path forward, perhaps faster path forward, of working with the community and coming up with a vision that meets their goals, but better meets the conservation goals and the community goals, might be successful. So I don't want to pretend that I understand the circumstances there, because I really don't. Just the cursory description is what I know.
Can we do a cutoff of 2 more questions?
Sure.
This has been great. I don't want to
Yeah.
drag it out.
Thank you, Bob.
In the back?
I'd like to defer to Brian. Go ahead.
Earlier you mentioned a New England Village design concept.
Yes.
On this project here, did you consider incorporating any type of retail aspect to it, you know, a little village college,
Yeah.
coffee shop and so forth? I don't see that in the plans.
That's a great question, excellent question. I'm glad you raised it. We did not, because this unfortunately is on the periphery of the community. It's not near the town center. There is potential for some of that to be created later. But there's no there yet. And so the developer was not comfortable building that into the vision at this moment in time. And I didn't blame him. It would be a little bit risky. You know, but as that development gets constructed and people get established there, I think revisiting some of that. So retail and commercial components of it. I was a little disappointed, to be honest with you, but I guess the answer is not yet. I think this is the last question. Please.
I'm curious whether the concept is that this will produce housing opportunities within your population, or if you expect it to increase your population?
It will increase the population somewhat. We think that the demand will be strongest for those looking to downsize, or strong, when we say strong, not strongest. But that there'll be plenty of buyers that will be from Stowe, that will be looking to sell the big family home and downsize into one of those nice units there. But you know, the population of the town will increase somewhat. And I guess where I was going is, based on the assumption that there'll be strong demand for downsize, you know, retired couples looking to downsize, that the number of additional school children will be, you know, dampened just a little bit compared to the 187 unit by right development with the 5,000 square foot homes. Those would be, every one of those would be a young family.
Thank you very much.